Membranes, they cover the surface of every cell. We call them as plasma membranes. These membranes also surrounds the cellular organelles. They have numerous functions. Some of them are the plasma membrane, it keeps the cellular components inside the cell. They also allow some molecules to move across the membrane, and it checks that some molecules will not enter. So we call that as selective permeability. So the membrane is selectively permeable. Apart from this, they also isolate the organelles from the other cytosolic components. The membranes which covers the cellular organelles, they make a microenvironment so that a particular activity takes place in that organelle. They are also sites of biochemical reactions. They allow for cell to change their shape. So plasma membrane also have this function that they can help in altering the structure or shape of an cell. Plasma membrane is common to all cells. It forms its outer limit. It forms the boundary for dissolved substances, allowing for the exchange across the membrane. They allow cells to maintain themselves, that is, it distinguishes a cell from the other cell because of the presence of the plasma membrane. Bacteria, fungi, plant cells have cell wall. In addition to the plasma membrane, exterior to that, in case with bacteria, fungi and plant cell, they have extra appendage, we call that as a cell wall. But it is a structurally distinct feature and lies outside the plasma membrane. Cell wall we have already discussed. It has different function. It gives a structure and protection to the cell, while plasma membrane, it selectively allows some molecules to move across the membrane. So every cell, every living cell, it must have a membrane. Cells and membranes. The membrane surrounding a cell is called as a plasma membrane. It forms the boundary that separates the living cell from its non-living surrounding. Although the plasma membrane is only 8 nanometer thick, it is selectively controls the movement of molecules or materials across the cell. It is responsible for cell-to-cell communication, cell-to-cell recognition, and for transferring or for relaying the cellular signalings. It is a dynamic structure with distinct inside and outside faces. The currently accepted model for the structure of the plasma membrane is the fluid mosaic model given by Singer and Nicholson. In this model, there is a double layer of phospholipid, that is fats and phosphate tails. We call it as a phospholipids, which are arranged with their hydrophobic tails facing inwards, while the phosphate groups, they are facing outward. The hydrophilic head, that is phosphate, is attracted towards water both inside and outside the cell to cell in a watery environment. The double layer of lipid is quite fluid with proteins floating within it. Here we can find these structures. These blue color structures, they are the phosphate groups, and this small thread like structure is the fat or fatty acid tails. This one head, which we can call as a hydrophilic head, made up of phosphate group, and this tail is the hydrophobic tail made up of lipids. So this structure, it forms a bilayer structure, and these are the proteins which are associated with these membranes. The glycoproteins, glycolipids and cholesterol are also integral part of the membrane. That is, they are part of this cellular membrane. Plasma membrane, it consists of different proteins associated with, And these proteins in turn they are associated with some carbohydrates and some lipids. So we call them as glycoproteins. As the name suggests, they are the carbohydrate and protein conjugate. This glycoproteins play an important role in cellular recognition and immune responses. They help stabilize the membrane structure by helping in the adhesion of the different components that can come and interact with it. For cell to cell recognition and for several other functions, these molecules play important role. Similarly, there are glycolipids. As the name suggests, these are the carbohydrate entities which are associated with the lipid components. We call them as in glycolipids. They act as a surface receptor and stabilizes the membrane. They are commonly seen in the brain cells and nerve cells. There are some proteins which are not integrated inside the membrane. Proteins which are not directly embedded inside the cells, they are referred to as an peripheral proteins. They are stuck to the surface of the membrane. While some proteins, as in this case, they are transmembrane protein. Transmembrane means they can transverse across the membrane. The proteins associated with the membrane can be further classified depending upon their functions. That is types of membrane protein. The proteins can help in cell to cell recognition. Some proteins can act as an integrin proteins which are integral part of the membrane. Some proteins they help in intercellular junction proteins, or they act as an intercellular junction proteins. As the name suggests, help in linking with the other cells. Some membrane proteins they can act as an enzymes which are the biocatalyst. Some of the proteins they also help in relaying the signal that has been given out by some other cell, or they can respond when an appropriate ligand comes and binds on a particular receptor. So they are also known as a receptor proteins. Transport proteins they can help in the movement of molecule across the membrane. This transport can be of two types. One is passive transport, wherein no additional energy is required, while in case with the active transport, this transport is against the concentration gradient and energy has to be invested so that molecule can move across the membrane.